All right, so let's, I'm going to start from scratch here. I'm going to create a new composition. I'm going to do 2 up here, but let's just call this sunset 2. Okay, so here's my new composition. I've got a black background, Command K. Let me turn on my keylogger. Now you guys stop me at any point in time if you have questions. Okay, but Command K will come in, right? I've literally just done 1920 asterisk 2, 1080 asterisk 2. That gets you to 2K, right? So if you don't remember 3840 and 2160, you can just do 1920 by 1080 and multiply it by 2. And then I like to do 24 frames per second. I'm going to do 30 seconds for this. So that's all good. Okay. Then I'm going to come in and actually I'm going to start with a square for this reason. So I'm going to come in here and go 2160. So I'm just going to start with a square, and then I can come in. I can choose my circle, and if I double click, then it puts that to fill that composition. So if the composition is a square, then you get a perfect circle. A bit of a shortcut, but I'm going to come in here and let's get rid of my stroke. Let's add a fill. Okay. And so this is my sun. Okay. I'm just going to shrink this down just a little bit. Let's just change the size somewhat. Okay. And then we'll just lift it up. Okay. Now I'm going to name this sun. Okay. And then I'm going to create a new shape layer. And let's change colors here. And I'm going to create a rectangle. And I'm going to use this as my track mat. So I'm just going to create a rectangle like that. Okay. And we'll call this Horizon Track Mat. Okay. And just track mat, right? So pick whip the track mat, disappears, easy peasy. Okay. I'm going to select the sun now, and I want a copy of this, right? And so I'm going to come over here. I'm going to press Command D, and that will duplicate it for me. Okay. Yeah.
So how did you make that a track mat?
So if you look right here, let me undo that. Any layer can be a track mat, and you're going to go here and you can see track mat. If you don't see track mat there, then down at the bottom you can toggle switches and modes, and it'll switch back and forth between. Oh, right, that's annoying. Hold on. Go down a little bit more. Stay. Nope. It's this button. I can't get it to stay down. Go up and then down. Okay.
Pull it like towards the screen.
That's why, is because I can't push it in. Anyway, it's this button right down here.
Okay, I'm about to go over and help because I've seen a classmate do it before. Like, you see if I replicate what he did, we figure it out. So
Yeah, if you want to try to figure out the bottom of that, that's fine. But let me just do this as well. This could be helpful. Let me get down here, and we'll just lift to there. There we go. Okay, so it's this button, toggle switches and modes, and as you press that, it toggles back and forth between these things. If you can't see it, you can right-click up here and go to columns, and it'll be in that. So we're looking at switches here, and it'll open up with track mat. Once I have that track mat, I've got 2 options. One option is I can choose from a list of available layers. And so you'll notice that sun is grayed out because you can't track mat yourself. And then all of the other layers will be listed. In this case, it's only one other layer. Or I can pick whip next to that track mat like that.
This is just a minor question, but does adding a glow effect to the sun, will that screw this up later, or does that not matter?
It depends on where you put it, but it will not. It can screw it up, or it might work just great. What I would recommend is if you want the sun to glow but not the water, then you'd put it on the layer. If you want the sun and the reflection in the water, I would put it on an adjustment layer above those 2 layers.
Okay.
Yeah. Did that help with the track mat?
Yeah. And then you just pick whip it up. But like, what does? Sorry, I'm trying to
That's okay.
think of like when you whip it up.
Mm-hmm.
What like is that do?
Yeah. So a pick whip is literally just doing something that's next to it. And so if I went in here and I used the pick whip next to size, and I go to rectangle, actually I've got to go to something else. So if I go to transform scale and I go transform here and I go scale to scale, just like that, all I've really done is put this line of code in that I could have typed, but it just goes and gets that thing. And so the same thing with the track mat. All the pick whip does is just it's a faster way to do this drop down menu. So it just does that drop down menu. When you choose something as a track mat, a few things happen. One is the thing that became the track mat is invisible now, and you can toggle its visibility by pressing this eyeball. I'm going to put it underneath, okay? And you can see that where that kind of blue layer is, my circle shows up. Where the blue layer isn't, my circle doesn't show up. And if I move the blue layer, then the circle will be hidden or shown based on where this blue layer is. And so that's all a track mat is it's just saying, you know, where there are pixels here, show stuff. Does that make sense? Okay. Now the next one, what I'm going to do is I'm going to take the sun, I'm going to make a copy of the sun, Command D, okay? And because I duplicated it with Command D, it has all of the attributes, so it's already track matted. But I'm going to go here and I'm going to invert. So this is your Luma or Alpha mat, which we'll talk about later. And this is invert. So if I invert, it flips that so that now it's doing the opposite with the track mat. So sun is track mat. Sun 2 is inverted track mat. Okay,
It's
and
putting a very thin line in there between the two.
yeah, we'll deal with that in a bit. So there's something that we're going to do with a couple of effects that will kind of smooth that out.
Wait, how do we make that show up? Because for me, I'm just not even seeing the boxes for the 2 suns.
You might need to expand here to give yourself a little bit more room. Is that not working?
No.
That might be also
And it won't affect.
one of the columns. I'll circle back to that in a minute. Okay, so just so that we know what's going on, I'm gonna take Sun 2, and I'm just gonna color it differently, just so you can see. But it'll all be the same color eventually. So I'm gonna go to Fill, and I'm just gonna change this to a green. Okay, so and then we can rename this temporarily here, and we'll go Sun Green. Okay, so we've got one is inverted, one is not, and that's kind of what's going on. So as I move this around, it's hiding or showing both of those layers based on where the track mat is. Good so far? Okay. So now I'm going to come in here and I'm going to start adding some stuff. So let's go back to our notes here. And let's look at some of these suggestions. So one of these suggestions is wave warp. Okay. Now we've done wave warp before. You guys remember doing wave warp, and you can stack wave warp up, right? I think somebody back here got like cool flame licks, right? Yeah, by getting it at the right angle or whatever. We're also going to look at turbulent displace and ripple. Okay. There's turbulent noise and a displacement map. And then there's turbulent displace, Venetian blinds and a displacement map, Gaussian blur and levels, okay? And then you've got these video tutorials, okay? So let's start with wave warp. I think I'm also going to do I don't think I included this in the thing.
Yeah, my problem was nothing.
What was it?
Yeah, I was matting the wrong thing.
Oh, okay, good. So I'm going to come in here and on my sun green, I'm going to go up to effects, right? And you can just search for anything up here, right? And so I'm going to just search for turb, which will bring up, if I spell it correctly, turb. Then I've got my turbulent displace and turbulent noise. I'm going to start with turbulent displace. And I'm just going to drag it onto that layer and then let go. And then in your effects controls panel, which by default is over here, but I move it on its side so I can see both of these things. You've got a couple of different things going on, okay? So turbulent displace, and this is where we already see something, and I can kind of scrub and see that nothing's really changing, okay? And so some of these are animated, and some of these you have to animate. This is one that I can do stuff to it, but it doesn't animate by itself. But we notice that each of these different things has a stopwatch next to it.
Sorry, I just got a little bit lost for the effects and presets. I'm looking at like turb, but it's not showing it.
You're not in this panel, so that panel needs to be taller.
Oh, okay, I see.
Okay, so you can see that already I've got some kind of like liquefying stuff that's happening, and as I kind of turn this, I can get different things. So one thing I could do is I could just change this evolution and get kind of some reflection going on, right? And so, but how would we, using what we already know, how would I animate this movement so that it just continues to change? That this evolution just continues to spin in a circle? Can anybody think of an expression that we've already learned?
Would you just use the cycle expression?
So loop out cycle, you could, right? And that would, if you went 0 to 360, that would work. Is there another loop out that might work? Loop out offset or loop out continue, right? And so either one of those, I like loop out continue because it's just the simplest. And so I'm just going to come in, I'm going to turn evolution on, okay? I'm going to hit this and hit U, which exposes that keyframe. I'm just going to move a little bit. And then I'm going to come over here, option click, and I'm going to type loop out. Okay, I'm going to hit quotes, and then I will choose continue. Okay, and what happens is I've set some kind of movement. It goes from 0 to 48. Okay, and so it's just going to continue at that speed. And as I keep going, it'll continue to go. And it's like, ooh, that's kind of slow. So I can do one of two things. I can just increase the second keyframe, right? Or I can move it closer. And either way, the evolution will continue to evolve to give me a little bit of a ripple. Okay? But what I'm not getting is I'm not getting those breaks. And so I want to get some of those breaks. So the next thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to come in here and I'm going to stack up another effect. Okay? And so I'm going to come in here and I'm going to do a roughen edges. Okay? And so I just type rough and that kind of comes up. I'm going to drag it down to sun green. Okay? And with roughen edges, there's a couple of things that you can do. And the main ones that you're going to look at are scale and border. Okay? But any of these, you can kind of come in, you can increase or decrease what's going on. And it doesn't look like much is happening. I can move this offset turbulence. Okay, and this is where I would say this isn't really doing anything, right? Now we're gonna come back and use roughen edges later for a different effect. But for right now, I'm gonna say it doesn't do anything. And so if I try an effect and I don't like it, I can click on it and I can hit delete and it just goes away. Okay? So rough and edges isn't it. Let's come in and let's try wave warp. Okay? So I'm going to grab wave warp and I'm going to drag it over here. Okay? And already I'm seeing this. Okay? Now with wave warp, I'm going to turn turbulent displace and collapse that so we don't get confused. You've got this big list of things, right? I can do squares, triangles, sawtooth, circles, semicircles, uncircles, noise, smooth noise. There's all that type of stuff. We're going to stay on sine for right now, but all of these are options. Okay? And when I go to sine, I now have wave height and wave width. By default, it's at 90 as an angle, which means that it is running along the x-axis. Okay? And so when I do height, you notice that it gets taller, right? And when I do width, you notice that it gets wider. Okay? So I'm going to go wide, and I'm going to go tall. Okay? And I'm going to rotate this so that we're down here. And now it waves back and forth. And if I'm like, I just want to see what wave warp is doing without turbulent displace, you can click on the little FX button like that, and you can see what we're getting. That's not bad. I kind of like that. Okay? But it's pretty, if I'm going to hide, let's hide the sun here. Let's hide our horizon there. Okay? I'm kind of go like this. It's pretty computery, right? There's not a lot of randomness to it. And so this is where you might add a second wave warp. Okay? Or, to save yourself some time, you could select wave warp and press Command D. Okay? And it just did more of the same because I just stacked it. But I'm going to take one of these and I'm going to change the angle slightly. And now that this angle is slightly off, you're going to see two different waves that are kind of interacting with each other. And I can decrease the height of some of these, decrease the width of some of these, and you'll see that they're kind of interacting that way. So that's another way to do it, right? I'm stacking up wave warps. Not bad. Okay. Let's turn on turbulent displace again. So I'm going to come back over here. Let's turn on turbulent. And now you'll notice that I've introduced a little bit of kind of a broken thing. And with these stacks, I can kind of start to play with this. I can say size, right? And I can kind of see where I want to go with amount. I'm going to increase the amount. Okay, I'm going to come over. You also see that there's this. This is called the offset. On some effects, it's called center. Okay? This is not an anchor point, but it's where the math originates. And so anything that is involving an X or a Y axis, it goes in and it starts here. Okay? And so one of the things that I could do is on that offset turbulence, I could just come up like this, move it to the top, turn this on, move my playhead and move this down a little bit, and then just do the same thing that I did before, right? So I now have this, and I'm going to option click, and I'm going to do a loop out, continue, okay? And so now I'm going to get a bit of randomness in there. We got to wait for it to kind of freak out for a minute. Okay? And so that's an option as well. Now I'm still not getting the horizontalness that I want. Okay? So let's go back to our notes and let's look at some of the other options. Any questions so far? By the way, today is like drinking from a fire hose. I don't expect you to understand or retain everything that I'm saying. My goal is for you guys to experiment with stacking effects. So if you forget how one of these works, jump into that video playlist and you can just say like, oh yeah, I remember he did something with wave warp, but I don't remember anything about how to control it. Jump into that video playlist.
So I am just wondering why the wave warp like continues throughout when we haven't done any loop outs on that one. Is it just modifying the other effects that are already there?
Yeah, so some effects are, so we could turn off. So let's go back to wave warp, and I'm going to turn everything off except one of them. So I'm going to turn off turbulent, and I'm going to turn off the second wave warp. And without anything on there, it will continue to do that. Some effects are animated by default. Some effects are not. So like a ripple can continue to ripple. Flow motion can continue to do that. Some of them are just distortion effects that are not animated until you animate them. And so what I recommend is turn some of those sliders up and then don't put any keyframes down and press play to see if that effect is animated or not. I am not aware of a way to distinguish the ones that are animated or not until you do that. There might be one, but I'm not familiar with it. Cool. Okay. So we've got this. Let's go back to our notes and let's take a look at what we've got. Okay. So now let's look at turbulent. Turbulent noise is another one that we could do. And so I'm going to come in and I'm going to go back to turb here. Okay. And I'm going to grab turbulent noise, drag this down. Okay. And what we get here is this starts to do something that I'm like, I don't know what that is. Turbulent noise is different than turbulent displace. Turbulent displace is a displacement map where it moves stuff around in kind of a random way or a turbulent way. Turbulent noise, it turns something into a displacement map. So let's talk about displacement maps for a minute. I'm going to undo this and I'm going to open up a new thing. Okay, so we'll just call this example. Okay, now if I have an image, okay, I think I have a grid on here somewhere. Grid, yeah, there we go. Nope, nope, nope. None of those are grids. I don't know why it's called grid. Let's do I have my basketball? Yes, all right. So here's a layer, okay? There's a little scene. Okay, I'm gonna create a solid, new solid, which is it's just a colored layer. Okay, and here's my solid, and I'm gonna add turbulent noise. Okay, now what it does is it goes in and it creates this, and I can come in and I can make it brighter, I can make it darker, I can do different things, okay? I can make it more or less complex, I can change it so that it animates over time and kind of moves around, okay? But when I go to basketball, okay, I'm gonna search for displacement map, okay? And the displacement map is an effect where you choose another source, in this case, this white solid, and I'm going to do effects and presets, okay? And I move this up. And what you'll notice is that starts to move, but I'm going to shift this. I'm going to change these to luminance. I'll tell you what I'm doing in a minute. And then I'm going to start shifting this. And what you're seeing now is you are seeing the displacement map change the layer either on the X or the Y axis based on the value of the other layer, okay? So let me explain what that means. If I go like this, let's do this. I don't have Illustrator open, so we'll do it this way, okay? So I'm gonna have like this, and let's fill this. You know what, let's do this in After Effects. So let's go to After Effects. I'm gonna create a new shape layer. Okay, and in this shape layer, I'm going to create an object like this, and in this fill, I'm going to do a gradient like that, okay? And in my gradient fill, I'm going to separate these around. So let's pull this. Why is that like that? I'm less familiar with gradients and does anybody know how to control a gradient here? This isn't working like I want it to. Oh, I need to, if you switch to your selection tool, sorry, you have to switch to V, then you can pull these apart. Don't ask me why edit gradient doesn't do that. That just seems stupid to me. But anyway.
I agree.
So you have to switch to your selection tool for that to work. Okay, then I'm gonna go in and I'm just gonna posterize this just so you can see what's going on. So I'm gonna go to Effects and Presets, Posterize, okay? And posterize just gives you these steps like that. So that's all that is. Okay. All right. I'm going to switch my layer here. I'm going to switch my basketball layer to the shape layer. Okay. And what you're seeing now, let's go 0. Okay. What you're seeing now is that I can shift this based on how gray that is. Okay. Or I can go like this, and I can shift it up or down based on how gray it is. Okay? Now here's where it gets a little bit confusing and people misunderstand. Some people think that, I'm going to make a copy of this. Command D, bring that to the top. Let's move this up. Okay? So if you look at the fence, you would think that black is 0 and white is 100, right? That's not the way that it works. So the way that it works is a 50% gray is 0, black is -1, and white is +1. So what that means is a 50% gray will not be affected by the displacement map. And then as it gets brighter, it'll be multiplied by that. So as I do this basketball here, I am multiplying 285 by how much of a fraction of 1 this gray is, right? And so when I multiply it by 0, I get 0. But if I multiply it by 0.125, I'm going to get a little bit. But if I multiply it by 0.5, I'm going to get half. And if I multiply it by 1, I'm going to get all of it, right? And then the same thing on the other side. If I multiply it by -0.5, then I get half in the opposite direction. Does that make sense? Okay. If it doesn't, that's okay. It's kind of confusing, okay? So basically what I'm doing is think of these values, these grays, as a numerical value. This is -1, this is -0.75, this is -0.25, this is 0. This is 0.25, this is 0.75, and this is 1, or whatever. That math doesn't make sense, but it's, it increases as it goes to the right and decreases as it goes to the left. And then what you're doing is you just get more of it as you go to the edges. And so if I switch my vertical displacement to horizontal displacement, you'll see that it goes towards the center or away from the center, but the center doesn't move because the center is 0. Okay? With me so far? Little bit. If I change this displacement map to that white solid, remember what that looks like? It looks like this. This has all kinds of different values in it. And so all over the place, you're getting different numbers. Okay? And that displacement map can give us a lot of effects. And so if we want to go in and we want to give us kind of an erratic ripple, then we can create a weird looking thing like this, and there's a lot of different ways to create something like this, and have it procedurally generate. So if I go like this, nothing's happening, right? But some of these, I'm in the wrong thing. Some of these will move this, right? You can see that it kind of moves, right? You can increase or decrease the complexity. You can increase or decrease the brightness. You can increase or decrease the contrast, right? I could come in and I could change the type of this, so I could go to basic or whatever, right? And all of that is going to give me a different map for the computer to say, how much do I shift this to the left or the right? Or how much do I shift this up or down? I'm seeing a lot of this face. So let me show you something a little bit easier, okay? Yeah, it's a weird thing. I'm going to create another solid, okay? And on this solid, what I'm going to do is I'm going to add some Venetian blinds. And so I'm just going to make this red for now. Okay, so there's our red solid. I don't know how to spell Venetian, so I'll look up blinds. And then I'm going to drag this over like that, and it looks like nothing happens. okay? But what I'm going to do is I'm going to increase or decrease the width. And this is a transition. And so you can see that it does this transition, right? So I can get however much I want, and then I can increase the width of this, okay? And some of you guys might be seeing what I'm doing already. But I'm going to get some of this action, right? And then I'm going to change this. I'm going to change this solid to white. And if I do this, you can see it's actually transparent, right? This is a transition, so you just go from 0 to 100 and it gives you a transition. But we're not going to use it as a transition, so we're not going to animate it that way. I'm going to change the fill of this by going to a fill effect. I'm just going to drag my fill effect over here, and let's change this to black. Okay, so this says red solid. We're gonna call it blinds. Okay, and then I'm just gonna create a new solid underneath that, and I'm gonna change that to white. Okay, we'll put that underneath. So now I have these two things. Do you guys see where I'm going with this? Because I can say black or white shifts in opposite directions, either horizontally or vertically, I can start to control on my own displacement map how much my little reflection is going to move around, right? Okay, so this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to take these two and I'm going to compose them, okay? And we'll call this stripes 2 because I've already done this once, okay? And then I'm going to come in a little bit and I'm going to do some stuff to this. So one thing that I'm going to do is I don't want hard edges, right? And so if I take stripes 2 here, let's go back to our sunset 2. Is that what we were working on? Okay, sunset 2. Okay, and I'm going to come over here and let's add our stripes here. Okay. What just happened? That should be. Did that change? There we go. Okay. Back here. There we go. Okay. And so I'm going to come in and I'm going to go sun green. Let's grab a displacement map. And we'll drop it on sun green. Okay. I'm going to hide this layer because I don't need to see it. And I'm going to change my displacement map to stripes. Okay. And then I'm going to change this to luminance, because luminance means the luma, the brightness of it, right? So I'm going to go luminance on both of these, okay? And then I'm going to shift my horizontal displacement, and you'll notice that it's pretty straight, right? It's straighter than I like. In fact, I'm just going to come in here and I'm going to turn all of these off, okay? And you'll see that it's just a straight shift because this map is just black and white, right? I'm going to take this and let's scale this down a little bit. Okay, and you can see that it just kind of shifts. Okay, so let's go back here. Kind of shifting like that. So I'm going to go back into stripes here, and I'm going to add an adjustment layer. So I'm going to go new adjustment layer. Now adjustment layers, just like in Photoshop, adjustment layers on your layers panel, anything that you put on an adjustment layer, it does that stuff to every layer that's underneath it, right? And so instead of having to go into each layer, I can go, just everything beneath this needs to do this, okay? And the first thing I'm going to do is blur it. So we'll go blur. Okay, and I'm going to look for Gaussian blur here. Okay, and I'm going to drag Gaussian blur under there, and I'm going to just turn blurriness way up. Okay, and now what you'll find, okay, is as I come in here and I go back to this, now it kind of bends a little bit more, right? Okay, so I'm going to go back into stripes here. I can blur it more, I can do whatever. I'm also going to add a warp. So I'm going to come in here and I'm going to add a warp, okay? And this warp, you have this list where you can do arc, arc lower, arc upper, arch, bulge, shelf, flag. I can do all kinds of different things. And I can come in here like this, right? And I can increase or decrease this, and it'll start to do stuff, right? And so you can start to see how that would kind of shift things. So I can come in and kind of do these types of things, okay? And as I do that, go back to this, you can see that now that shift is happening, but it's happening along that bending black and that bending white rather than those straight horizontals. Okay, so that's one way to use kind of a displacement map. Okay, let's look back over here. Okay, another thing that you could do is you could add a turbulent displace, Venetian blinds, and a displacement map. I can also come in and I can add one of these, and I can do this Gaussian blur and then a levels adjustment. Let me show you what this does. So this gets really cool, and this is where we get rid of that little line and stuff. So if I come in here like this, and let me just show you what this looks like. So let's go to sunset 1. Okay, you can see how this kind of like all bleeds together. Okay. If I take that off, let's see, where is that? Should have an adjustment layer. This one? Yeah. If I take this adjustment layer off, everything gets really sharp and you can see the line. Okay? What this adjustment layer is doing is two things. One thing is I put a Gaussian blur on it, right? So everything just gets really fuzzy. Okay? And then the other thing is I clamp down on the alpha channel of that Gaussian blur to smash everything together. Let me show you what I mean by that. So I'm going to delete this, and we'll do it one more time. So I'm going to come in here, and I'm going to go to New Adjustment Layer. Okay? I'm going to bring this down on top of this stuff. And on this, I'm going to start with a Gaussian blur. Not Legacy. Let's do Gaussian blur normal. Okay? And then I'm just going to crank that way up. I'm going to get it really blurry. Okay? Now you'll notice that this is kind of just like squinting. Everything starts to kind of bleed together a little bit, okay? And I'm going to add a little rectangle here, and let's make it red. Let's make it a fill color. That is red. Okay, so we got this little red rectangle, okay? And I'm going to put this under my layer so it kind of blurs. And I'm just going to move this back and forth just so you guys can see how this works. So let's go here to here. Okay, and then let's go here and we'll go loop out. Oops. Loop out, ping pong. Okay. So now it's just going to go, that red's just going to go back and forth, okay? You'll notice that as we get to these edges, it starts to kind of blend together a little bit because it's fuzzy. The edges are kind of blurring, okay? But it's fuzzy, and I don't want it fuzzy. So the next thing that I'm going to do is on my adjustment layer, I'm going to add a levels adjustment. Levels, okay? And I'm going to come into levels here. I'm just going to grab this, drag it over the top, okay? Now, normally your levels is going to be RGB or black and white or whatever, and you've got this list of what channel you want, okay? Do you want your red, your green, your blue, or all three of those, or alpha? And in Adobe, alpha means transparency, okay? And so I'm going to choose alpha, okay? And what I'm going to do here is I'm going to clamp down on this, and you'll notice as I clamp down on that, it starts to tighten up that edge. But everything is kind of blurring together. You don't want to go so hard that it gets really pixelated. So it's just a little bit off of pixelated. There's still a slight blur because I haven't completely clamped down. But now let's play this. What you'll see is you'll see that red shape, if it were the same color, it kind of like snaps. I'm going to slow that down. it kind of snaps away from that, like like cheese on pizza, right? And that's a very liquid type of thing to do. And so that's one of the main tricks to getting this reflection to look like this. Let me just play this through, okay? And so just to explain again what's happening, I added an adjustment layer, and on that adjustment layer, I did a Gaussian blur. That's why the red is fuzzy. So everything underneath that, all of the shapes underneath it are fuzzy. They're Gaussian blurred. And then I went in, you can tell it doesn't like the corners of that as it's kind of vibrating through, it doesn't know what to do. But then I went in and I clamped down on the alpha channel, the transparency of that. So when you make something blurry, the middle of it is totally opaque and outside of it is totally transparent, and then it transitions from a little bit of transparency to a lot of opaqueness as it kind of goes on the edge. And if you clamp down on that alpha channel, it just squishes where that edge is, that transition is. Does that make sense? I feel like I've lost everyone, but.
There's also an adjustment layer too, right? Like if you were just turn the adjustment layer off, it would still be the
Yeah. Yeah, so I can just turn this adjustment layer off and it goes back to being hard. Right? Turn it on and it kind of all goes back to doing that. And you can add anything to the adjustment layer. You can add the turbulent displace, you can add the wave warp, you can add all of those types of things to the adjustment layer.
No need to use the square.
Yeah, because I'm not using the square, I was just using that to kind of show you what's going on. So we can go into this shape and just hide it, right? And I've kind of got this. Yes.
I don't know if I did mine wrong, but when I try and like, it just goes.
Do this top bar instead of the bottom bar. So you need a little bit more room. Open this window up, grab that and open it, and then grab this one.
Oh.
So let me show you what that was so that everybody understands. There's two different things going on here on your thing. There's this one down here. Don't touch that. You want to do this one up here. And so this one up here is the histogram. This is just a value thing. You can also change those numerically here. If you go alpha input black, alpha input white, you can change those around if you want, and it'll slide those sliders. So whichever one of those makes the most sense, but it's the alpha one that you're looking for. Okay, one more thing that I wanted to show you guys, and this is just a bit of a technique. So if we go back here, you can see in week 7. Line boil and grainy gradient shading, okay? And so if you click over here, this type of thing, I'm gonna say that this is a stylistic choice, right? But it's one that's been popular for a while, and I imagine it'll continue to be popular, and it's a really cool and easy thing to do, okay? And so what I'm gonna do here is I'm gonna come in here, and this is just roughen edges, which didn't work before because we were doing something different. So I'm gonna come in here like this. Let's go to Sun Ripple 2, okay? And we've got this guy, okay? It's doing its thing. I'm gonna make a copy of this shape. Is that this one? Yeah. I'm gonna make a copy of this shape. So I'm gonna click on it, press Command D, okay? And then I'm gonna change the color. So I'm gonna take this and I'm gonna make it a little bit brighter. Something like that, okay? Then I'm gonna come into this and I'm gonna do roughen edges. Now there's two different things that you're looking for, the border and the other one. So I go to roughen edges here, okay? I'm gonna increase my border by a lot, okay? And then I'm gonna decrease my scale by a lot. And all of a sudden I have this kind of edge, right? Now that animates with that shape, okay? And I can now do stuff to kind of do this, but the easiest thing that I'm going to do is on this new shape here, okay? I'm going to make my track mat this other shape, okay? And why did that go away? Let me undo that for a minute because that didn't do. Oh, because it's inverted. There we go. And then I'm going to take this one and let's twirl in, and I'm just going to change the contents to be slightly smaller. And you can see that it starts to kind of break that up. So you can get some really interesting things kind of going on with that. I think I put it on the wrong thing. I did. Why is this not showing up in my thing? Anyway, let me show you what it does when you do it right. I don't have time to do it, but you can see this kind of like fuzzy edge right here in that. And if I turn on this one, nope. This one, nope. Now I'm losing it. Anyway, that's the one. Okay. Then you can have these types of edges. You can do some interesting things with those types of just broken edges of things. Okay. So I've got 4 minutes. What can I review? You can see on this one I shrunk that down a little bit. I had the lighter yellow parented to the yellow, and then it goes behind, and it's track matted to the same track mat that the other ones are, so it disappears. But in it disappearing, it's got that edge to it, which has got that roughened edge, and so it just disappears in a more interesting way than a hard line.
So the adjustment layer with the blurriness and the levels is what kind of gave it that liquid murkiness.
Yeah. So that the fuzziness makes everything blend together, and clamping down on the alpha channel and the levels is what tightens it up so it's not fuzzy. So you're kind of making it fuzzy and then making it not fuzzy in those steps. Yeah. Other things? Yes.
This would maybe be specific to me. I don't know if anybody else is having this problem, but the waves that I created are just so wide they don't look like they're actually reflecting the sun.
Yeah. So what I would do is you can decrease the width and then add a second wave warp and put it at a slightly different angle. And then you can change the speed. And what it'll mean is one wave warp is going at one speed, the other wave warp is going at a different speed and a different angle, and it'll give you a more erratic looking reflection.
One of them is 3 degrees off. Both wave widths are 91.
Yeah. So I changed the speed of that as well, which is going to be on wave warp. I forget what that's called.
Wave speed.
Yeah. So the wave speed right down here, it's at 1.0. You can change that to be faster or slower, and that'll make it so that they're not lining up as well. And then just change the size so that they're not equal to each other. You want 2 wave warps on top of each other that don't equal each other, and then that'll give you a more erratic pattern. Okay. Most of this is going to be over the course of your lives as motion graphic artists, just tweaking stuff and experimenting with things and talking to other people or watching tutorials and how other people did stuff. And you'll start to get a feel for which one of these you can stack and which one of these you can mix, okay? And so go back to the instructions, okay? You've got this gradient shading. You've got this line boil, which I didn't have time to do today. But Tony Babel goes in and shows you some stuff, and this will give you a turbulent displace effect. He's got it here, and I've got some of those. And then I just have a bunch of suggestions here. I've got a bunch of suggestions down in these toggled lists of some things that you can try. Wave warp, turbulent noise, displacement map, turbulent displace, Venetian blinds, Gaussian blur and levels, all those types of things with screenshots. So play around. I'm going to be really loose with the grading on this. Basically, I just want to see that you can stack multiple effects and get it to kind of build and do stuff. In no way do I need it to look exactly like mine, but I would like it to look like it's reflecting in water. Yeah?
Last question. What would you say is the easiest way to make sure it actually breaks up?
The way that I got that to do that really well was in the Venetian blinds, I added a turbulent displacement map to the Venetian blinds, and then I changed the angle of the blinds, and that turbulent displace gave it a really ripply situation. And then when I put that inside and used that as a track mat, not a displacement map, but a track mat, it broke it up. And so these Venetian blinds are just black, and what you're seeing here is white is transparent. And so using that as a track mat literally hid parts of the reflection. Yeah. And I've got notes. If you look at this one, this turbulent displaced Venetian blinds, I have notes that I took as I kind of went. So create a solid black and add Venetian blinds to it, add a white solid underneath, add the turbulent displace to the comp. You can create 2 keyframes where they offset. And I've got screenshots for now. Add a displacement map to your reflection layer and use the stripes comp to da. Right. So I've got some of those notes. But adding a track mat to that composition where you've done that will break it up. You can also do one called smear, and it'll kind of cut into stuff. I didn't like how it worked, and I couldn't get it to do something that I liked, but somebody might be able to do it. Okay. If you got any other questions, I'll stick around for a couple minutes. Otherwise, we'll see you guys later.
I had a question.
Yeah, let me turn off my recording real quick, and I will